So I was reading some of the Infinity Ward community managers' tweets, and of course the big one that I read today was that there's a big change coming, and it's got almost 2 pages, I think it's over 2 pages worth of changes in the patch notes, and it's gonna be really cool and whatever. And of course the replies were a bunch of requests and demands. I mean, this dude here demanded all of this, like, oh, just add new maps, please. Remove an entire perk because people were using it with an overpowered gun. You know, just reasonable shit like that. I thought my recent 8-step plan to solve obsessive camping was reasonable. You know, buff the spotter perk, nerf ghost a little bit and change what it's used for, return the minimap to how it was for like the last 10 plus years, and you know, stuff like that. Simple changes that don't require them to completely rewrite the game and add a ton of new content and remake maps and all of that stuff. And yet we have people with these obsessively entitled demands. Maybe you see some of my ideas and requests as overly entitled, but I think they're a lot tamer than so many of the other requests I see coming from members of the community. Now, this video really isn't about people wanting the game to practically be remade and to have an entire DLC's worth of content or 2 DLC's worth of content added to it in order to fix the game. No, my problem is actually with the people that say something like this, and this is just the example I will use. I'm seeing this in a lot of different places. I don't want to put any of my viewers on blast, or any of my Twitter followers on blast, or even any of my friends on blast by giving out their names or showing their comment, and this is just the example. You've seen this around, especially if you hang out with Battlefield players. They'll toss this stuff around all the time, but if you're reading this person's rebuttal basically boils down to, well, that wouldn't happen in real war. Can we, for the love of God, stop throwing around the terms real war, actual combat, real service? I don't care. If you served your country, I have a lot of respect for you. My grandfather did, my father did, my oldest sister did. Trust me, I have the utmost respect for that. But none of those members of my family would think that they need to dictate game balance based on their experiences. There's something to be said for believability, there's something to be said for realistic tone and theme. Attention to detail and style and all of that is important. What I love about Modern Warfare is it's very much so a video game, but it's believable, it's detailed, and it's tactical instead of actually tactical. It's a very fun experience for me, because it's not trying to be something that it isn't. Even the most tactical, teamwork demanding milsim games out there are still games, and they still have video gamey things about them. And you can't balance an entire game based on what happens in real life. Obviously, you could go with the extreme and say, well, if we really want to be realistic, my character should have to stop and drink water, and you know, my character will suffer PTSD in between matches or something like that. You know, but that's dumb. Obviously, we know that's dumb. But saying that, well, in real life, there's no grenade timer for search and destroy. There's no search and destroy in real life. I mean, okay, I opened myself up for some jokes there, but for the most part, real life doesn't have game modes and game mode specific settings, unless you want to count actual games that we play, like football and baseball, things that have established rules in order to make them fair and balanced and fun for the participants as well as the spectators. If you read the comments on my video on fixing the camping problem, you'll see people in there saying, or at least a couple people saying that, oh well, in real war there's no actual camping, it's not what it's called, and I don't care. Yeah, in real life, you don't run around with a shotgun and an SMG, and you don't jump shot and drop shot around corners, and you don't, go and pick up big spinny red dog tags after you kill somebody. It's not how real combat works, okay? This is the same thing I ran into with Battlefield 1. When I complained about Battlefield 1, people said, well, it's just like the real war. Well, first of all, in no way was Battlefield 1 like the real war. And 2, even if it was, that doesn't make it a good video game. We're talking about competitive electronic toys. That's what we're talking about here. Is it a kick-ass toy? Is it an immersive toy? Hell yeah. Do you get emotionally invested in it? Do you want to progress in it and get better at it and play with your friends and cooperate with people and kick other people's asses? Of course, and that's great, and I am all into that. I wouldn't be running this channel if I wasn't. But saying X thing doesn't happen in real combat is an absolute cop-out. It's not an argument. It's not even a real point to make. There's so many things in a Call of Duty game that aren't realistic. You want to go after the thing that bothers you. And this is my real problem. An in-game item, perk, equipment, weapon, attachment, whatever it might be, is not to your liking, you want it removed, but you don't know enough about the game and its meta in order to properly argue why it should not be in the game, so you just figure out that, well, it wouldn't work in real life. So many things in the game don't work in real life, but you have a problem with the one that you can't actually articulate your opinion on, because the rest of the community will be talking about it in relation to being a video game. But because you are unable to talk about the game as it is a game, you have to go for the real-life comparison. In my opinion, what really adds to realism is freedom. That's why I like larger maps with more complicated areas. I like the fact that people can camp in Modern Warfare. I, of course, just want it to be more balanced so aggressive players aren't punished for wanting to be aggressive players. The very cookie-cutter 3-lane map design of previous Call of Duty games, recent previous Call of Duty games, rubbed me wrong because I didn't feel like there was anything interesting about them. They didn't allow for as much freedom, and they were just about forcing engagements so that you got into somebody's face faster and shot them faster. You didn't have the chance to really be slower. You kind of were countering the meta if you wanted to hang back. But the one thing that is true between all of my favorite combat games, my favorite competitive FPS games, and even open world FPS games like Far Cry or Fallout, I'm gonna get lambasted for calling Fallout an FPS, but whatever. My favorite thing amongst all of them is how much freedom does it allow me? Does it railroad me into the same engagements, into a meat grinder-like scenario, forcing me into tight choke points that are irritating to fight for? Or do I have a little bit more of a sandbox and I can make my own choices? I think the more choices a player has, you have more variables and it's harder to balance around it, and it's a lot easier to get frustrated in games where people have a lot of options. But I think those games, at their core, are more realistic in the sense that they do not railroad you into one thing. And if you were in that scenario in real life, you would have all these options that you could take advantage of, and it allows you to have some sort of creative problem solving. All of that is to say that realism is not something that I scoff at. It's just not relevant to game balance. Somebody has the humble request of, can we get a grenade delay in Search and Destroy? He doesn't want to spawn in and immediately get blown up by a well-thrown grenade. Now, I personally love the well-thrown grenades. I think you should run EOD if you're playing Search and Destroy. It's just a good rule of thumb. But, okay, yeah, a humble request. And you have these people that think that, well, that wouldn't happen in real war. You don't have a timer in real war. Okay, sure. We get it. In real life, you can do whatever you want, however you want to do it. But in video games, there are rule sets that need to be followed and the game needs to be balanced around. And I don't think that's a novel idea to people. I think deep down they know that they're playing a virtual toy. They're playing an electronic toy, and that they are not going to be able to change the course of the game by comparing it to actual combat, actual life, real physical life. Because the game already exists in real life, okay? We know this. Subconsciously or consciously, we know that the video game exists within real life. It's something we sit down and we use a tactile form of analog input, there we go, and we control the virtual space. We control ourselves in the virtual space. We know that it exists, okay? We're just not actually killing somebody. We're just not actually throwing grenades. But we are actually playing a video game where we're doing those things. And that video game needs to be fun for everyone, and our feedback needs to be heard. And we can't make decisions in the game based on how real life works. Okay, we can't have people getting shot in the leg by a stray round in Call of Duty and then tripping and falling and dropping their gun and crawling around on the ground and bleeding out slowly. We can't have that. That's just not fun. I mean, it could be fun in a different game, and we could play a game that's like that, and that's fine. And that would be that game's rule set. But then the game would have to be balanced around that rule set, otherwise nobody would play it. It would be too frustrating. I know this is an edge case, and I know that not everybody thinks this way, but I've seen it enough for it to bother me, and I've heard it enough for it to bother me, and I'm sorry. Reality and video games mix quite well because that's where they exist, but they don't mix when it comes to game balance. Let's let Modern Warfare be believable. Let's let it be detailed, pretty to look at, and tactical. Let's not try to rewrite it into a milsim. Let's not try to use actual combat as the baseline reference for how we want the game to be balanced when giving our feedback to video game developers. Thank you guys for coming to my little rant here. I hope it all made sense. Basically what I'm saying is that video games are not real life. Stop talking about real combat when people want their video game to be balanced, their competitive PvP game to be balanced. Stop bringing up real combat. And I totally get it though. I get that realism and freedom is something that a lot of people want in a game. I'm there with you. I want to be able to make decisions. I want to have interesting places to go to when I'm playing on a map. I want to have interesting ways to frustrate my opponents. I don't want to be forced into these constant engagements that feel very video gamey. I kind of want that sort of believability and the sense of freedom. And okay, yeah, I get that, but I'm not going to go watch real combat footage and start taking notes as to how Call of fucking Duty needs to play. Get out of here with that shit. I know that you just don't know how to talk about the game inside of its meta. You're not hiding it very well. See you when I see you. Goodbye.